Hello and welcome to Sacred Psychology, the podcast for misfits and mystics. Here, neuroscience and spirituality go hand in hand. Join me, Tamara Powell, on a no-holds-barred adventure outside the box, because that's where all the truly great shit happens anyway. Welcome back to Sacred Psychology. I'm your host, Tamara Powell. Now, before we dive into today's episode, I have a couple of quick announcements. The first is that I will be taking a holiday break from mid-December until after the new year. I hope you all have a wonderful season of giving and sharing and connecting with your loved ones. And perhaps take the opportunity to scroll back through any past episodes you may have missed. And secondly, I want to invite you to consider joining me in a 6-month sacred journey into your soul and psyche and all of the many splendid psychospiritual manifestations that comprise you, from the beautiful and ethereal to the dark and powerful. I created the sanctuary as a true inner sanctum for a core group of highly committed women who are ready to dive deep, real deep, and take total responsibility for their lives and the missions they came here to serve, and to feel completely connected to their authenticity and spirituality. Now, healer archetypes like coaches, therapists, helpers, and healers will especially benefit from this program. So, if you're feeling like you've hit a plateau in life, business, or personal or spiritual development, or you just crave more, the sanctuary may be exactly what you're looking for. From February to July of 2019, we're going to meet weekly to explore in depth a variety of topics designed to heal, awaken, and empower each woman's optimal set point for satisfaction and success, including self-reliance, radical autonomy, the power of ritual from a psycho-spiritual perspective, and how to find your unique path, creating your own prescription to break the illusion of persona and negative internal narratives, embracing the flow or Tao and embodying the sovereignty goddess, and sacred sexuality. I'll also be bringing in some of my most trusted colleagues from my incredible, diverse, and masterful network to help us expand and grow in some really powerful areas such as astrology, sexuality, relationships, mindfulness, intuition, healing trauma, and leadership. There's really something for every woman here. You'll be receiving access to elite knowledge and experience from world-renowned experts in their field. On the third week of every month, you'll receive a guided meditation and journey into the ethos and the shadows, which will sometimes include energy clearings and activations. So if you're into that, this is definitely something you're going to be excited about. These sessions have become the cornerstone and bedrock of my experiential approach as a psycho-spiritual healer and mentor. Trust me, you're going to love it. In the fourth week, we'll have a live Q&A session together, and to top it all off, there's a private Facebook community for daily support if you like, as well as workbooks with homework suggestions, journal prompts, and more. There's even an archive from last year's group experts to scroll through at your leisure. Are you ready to add a little or a lot more rocket fuel to your rebel soul? Head on over to ariatherapy.com/the sanctuary. That's ARYA therapy.com/the sanctuary to see which level of support is right for you. I'll also have a link to this in the show notes, so no worries if you forget that URL. And if you join before the new year, you can select an extended payment plan as low as $98 a month if you like. I can't wait to see you there. Now on to today's show. You'll know that I am a total Enneagram nut, so I was thrilled to run across Havilah Siegmann. Like myself, she uses the Enneagram on the daily, both personally and in business. As a raised in evangelical land girl, Havilah was full of faith and questions, and always reading. A former music teacher, Havilah now uses her teaching skills not only to lead others into deeper explorations of themselves, but also to break up fights and teach her 3 children how not to throw things at each other. I can relate to that one. Havilah started the Transformation Collaborative as an online place to share inspiration and encouragement. She also has a podcast called Little Faith, which is all about how to be good humans for ourselves and our little ones while living in the middle of doubt. Anyone else resonate with that? She has a magnetic personality, and I love her approach to the Enneagram. So whether you're hearing about the Enneagram for the first time right now, or if you've been doing your work with the Enneagram for some time, I think you're going to love this one. So, without further ado, I give you the one, the only, the ever incomparable Havilah Siegmann. Hey, Havilah, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
I am so excited. Like, I can't even tell you the Enneagram. Like, all of my followers know, like, I talk about it at least 30,000 times a day. Given that women probably only have 80,000 words, it's coming up at least every other sentence.
If you talk to anyone who knows me, it's the same.
So I can't even believe, I think this will be like episode 60 something. And this is the first total Enneagram episode that I'm doing. So it was long overdue.
Yes.
I'm so excited to connect with another Enneagram lover. I mean, we use it around my house. We use it in front. My kids talk to their friends. They've all come over and taken quizzes. So it's so fun. And I use it with almost every single client that will let me, because I just think it is a fantastic tool. But tell me about you and how you came to know about it and yada, yada.
Yeah. Well, let's see, where do I start? I learned about 10 years ago. And it was through our church, which is kind of funny because off recording, we were just talking about how it's not a Christian thing, but but that's where I learned about it. And, we had a small group, and it was kind of going around the church, and the different pastors were kind of introducing it to some people. And so they came and we went through some stuff, and I just remember I had no idea. I'd never heard about it before. I'd never done any reading on it. So we took this short little quiz or whatever, and I remember her reading through the list of things and qualities in my number, in the 4, and it was so weird because
it's like an out-of-body experience.
She was saying things that I had literally never told anyone in my life, including my husband who was sitting there with us. And it just rang so true. And I know that that's not everybody's story. Like, I've helped lots of people. I've been teaching the Enneagram for a while now too. And I have helped lots of people figure out who they are and where they land. And that is people's story sometimes, and it's not always.
Right.
But for me, that's what it was. And from then on, I was just kind of hooked because, geez, when you have that experience,
I know.
And being a 4,
of course,
I want all the self-knowing. I have to.
There's never enough. There's always another layer for 4s.
Absolutely.
Yes, which is fascinating being a therapist and working with so many 4s. I think 4s are really, prone in a good way to personal development work and coaching and therapy in general. And every once in a while, I have to remind someone, I'm like, listen, as a 4, your default is to dig for more. And sometimes, baby girl, you need to sit at the sweet spot. There's not always something wrong with you.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And I found that also with other people in relationships, I'm sure we'll get into that later, but it's so helpful in relationships. And it's been helpful for me to realize that other people don't always want to go there. And that
usually
maybe okay. I still feel like that can't be okay. But, but also, 4s have this thing, they're always labeled as unique, but I think we really just want to be seen.
Yes.
I think that's what it comes down to. But we also have this ability to we think that we're lacking of that thing that we want, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I had to kind of come to a realization that, actually I and this is the growth work, right? I have that thing. My ability to go into those places is the thing that I'm longing for that I'm afraid I don't have. But actually it's there. You have it and you're able to do that work. And that's a gift that other people may not have, but you can go into those spaces sometimes and help people. But the trick is not turning your disdainful, well, they're just too shallow.
Which I often get as a 7. So
yeah. Oh,
yeah.
7.
Mhm.
Yes.
I am a 7 and I'm raising a 4. And we'll get into more of what this means
Oh,
in a
good. Yeah.
second. But my youngest is a 4 and my 15-year-old is a 1. So it's fascinating to watch how we all share a line on the Enneagram.
Yes. Yep.
Yep. And then I'm dating a 2 right now. So that's it's just been fascinating to watch that development. And so I love what you said about it being a gift, because one of my favorite ways of describing the Enneagram is that it's almost as like if we, from a psycho-spiritual perspective, if such a thing as the divine, the universe, I don't care how you conceptualize that transpersonal piece, it's almost like every number, each type reflects a different part of the divine, kind of like a stained glass window.
Yeah.
And 4s, the romantic or the individualist, you are so well suited for going to those dark places and sitting in the shit and not having to fix it in a way that the rest of us just cringe at.
It's so interesting because I don't experience myself as like going there and like being comfortable there necessarily. I experience it as like there is no other way. But of course,
oh, girl, there's 8 other ways. Yeah.
I know. But it's just interesting that,
which kind of proves the point of our primary lens.
Yes.
And so I am curious to hear how you tend to describe the Enneagram. But as a therapist, I just find it to be so powerful as opposed to some of the other psychological assessments available to me, like the Myers-Briggs or the personal assessment inventory, etc. Because number one, it's got flow to it, not just static. It shows us where we go when we're happy, where we go when we're stressed out, and gives us a unique prescription for life. But then also, it really provides me as a clinician a breakdown between someone's primary lens and then their operant conditioning, their traumas from childhood.
Yeah.
I can show people, hey, listen, this was your nature, probably what you came into this incarnation on the planet, either created, evolved, don't care, these tendencies. But then, like your secondary and your third types are almost always one of your parents or your religion.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
So like I said, I've taught the Enneagram for several years now, and I've just had lots of conversations with friends and family and kind of helped people figure out what it is and introduce people to it. And I think the best way to talk about it is that it's just there's this phrase around the Enneagram world that's like the Enneagram doesn't put you in a box. It shows you the box you're already in.
I love it.
Yes. And the way out, right?
And the way out.
That I think is what it all comes down to for me. Like, because it's all about our motivations, and it shows us where we have ourselves trapped and how we have convinced ourselves that there's no other way to live.
This is just who I am. Yeah.
Yeah. This is just the way the world is. When I first encountered it really allowed me to see some things, that had strengths, but also see things like, oh, this thing over here that I do is not that I'm like crazy or weird or abnormal. It's just part of my personality.
It's a defense mechanism.
Other people, yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so I always like to tell people that it leads to freedom, right? It leads to freedom and health and wholeness. And I know some people want to debate like whether it's real or whether it's scientific. And like, I don't care because it works.
I love, what is his name? Ian Cron. He always says all models are flawed, but some are useful.
That's exactly that.
And
like
a scientific
so useful.
And he's a wonderful 4, but from a scientific point, having been the one that studies, internal, external validity, I have yet to find a single client in all of my years that has not grabbed a hold of it and gone, oh my God.
Yeah.
This just rocks my world. And it is so non-pathologizing. It does just show us, hey, you're not this thing that you think you are. We're actually a complex blend of all of them, but here's where you tend to get stuck, as you put it.
Yes.
And here's how you can get out. I love that. It actually leads to non-categorizing.
Exactly. Yeah.
Freedom. And who doesn't want more freedom in life?
Well, and I think that's some of the work that we have to do as Enneagram teachers and people who have known about it and worked with it for a while is that, especially now that we have this huge kind of upswell in interest, there are a lot of, what I see out there is a lot of people like using it like they would use Myers-Briggs or something, like where it's like, okay, this is a useful point of information about me and moving on. Oh, you're a 2, I'm a 7. Great.
Yep. 2 reductions.
And then, yeah. And, it can be really dangerous, and if it's left there and it can be used as an excuse for bad behavior, like I'm just an 8, deal with me.
Not licensed, y'all.
Yeah. So I think that's where I keep seeing like, this is where we need to push in, is we need to push into this transformation piece, which is what it's really all about anyway.
Thank you. A lot of the people in the back. Havilah said it. It's about that transformational piece. No, it really is. And I love what you just said about how it shows us, the intentionality behind our behavior. Other assessments don't do that. They're static. They're like, okay, this person's presenting as an extrovert or an introvert. This person tends to take information from their feelings or their senses, quoting the Myers-Briggs, but almost all of them are somewhere along that. Or they are just so strength-based, which who does not want their ego stroked and said, like, this is your beautiful strengths. But that doesn't lead me to transformation. Right. It's only when they're like, hey, 7, boo-boo, girl, you tend to get hella critical when when you don't think that you can rely on other people. You might want to change that about yourself. Yeah. And I'm like, oh, damn, I did not know that about myself. Yeah. You totally did. You've just been turning a blind eye.
Right.
Right?
Yes.
So let's give a brief introduction to all 9 if you're game.
Okay, yes. I will try to do a quick version. And I will say, for starters, for all of these numbers, like, this is the stereotype, right? So the surface. And we all have all of these numbers in us, like all of these pieces. So I know that when I'm walking some people through for the first time, they'll be like, oh, but I resonate here and I resonate here and I resonate here.
Of course you do.
Yes, you will resonate with all of them in some way, probably.
But so there's going to be one that gives you a bit of a gut punch.
One that you're like, oh, I'm definitely not that. Or, yeah. Yeah, so ones are really principled. They really want to do what's right in the world. They are the people that will like walk into the store and tell the people working in the store that their sign out front has a grammatical error.
Yeah,
like have to do that. They're very responsible. They're going to be on time. We thought my husband was a 1 for a long time, and finally we were like, you're never on time, and you don't care at all.
Is he a 9 with the 1 wing?
He's a 6.
Oh, wow. Well, there you go.
But he's a 6, but his dad's a 1. And so there's a lot of, one family culture.
Operant conditioning, yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, when ones are great people to have, like, we need them in this world. We need these people who always look to improve and look to do the right thing. But they can also become really critical, right? Because they see around them everything that's wrong that could be done better. And they're also really hard on themselves.
That's like the driving thing. I see so many ones just crippled by anxiety and insecurity at times. My mom's a 1. The ones are called the reformer, the perfectionist. Yeah. And my daughter's a 1. So I see it on both sides. And I love what you said, like, they have to correct you. Like, it literally, if you talk to one, it's like their skin is crawling at that grammatical error. They cannot not say that to you.
Yeah.
The other way that I love to talk about the Enneagram is almost like love languages. It's like how each type expresses their love. And to a 1, telling you that you've got lettuce in your teeth is the best thing. They would want you to do that for them.
Right.
And so I see so many ones that are beautiful whistleblowers of like what goes wrong with society. They're like, hey, this thing, they are social advocates, but in a weird, it's not weird, you say weird, but in a way that for the other 8 types might feel weird because it feels very critical or raw or abrasive until they learn how to use their discernment tactfully.
Yes. Yeah. So twos are often called the helper. Mm-hmm. And they are caring and nurturing, and they're warm and compassionate, and they're very outward focused. So these are people that you're going to want to have around you when you're like sick, because they will be there with the soup and the casseroles and like doing your laundry for you. And so, and they're often, it's kind of your typical what woman, basically, like what society and especially the church wants a woman to be. So
Proverbs 31, virtuous woman. She'll make you a meal plan for days.
She will.
Casserole dishes. Yeah,
I know. So every time when I'm helping somebody, if it's a woman, especially if she's a mother, I'm like, you might be a 2, you might, but just like put a pin in it and let's see if that's really where you are, if that's just what everyone has been telling you that you need to be, and that's who you are, right?
Mm-hmm.
So 2s are, like I said, they're very outward focused, but it can become, they can also be the people who are gonna do too much for you and are gonna start stepping on they're gonna start stepping on some toes. They really want to feel needed. So if they're in an unhealthy space and they feel like they're not needed by those around them, that can set off some unhealthy
codependency.
That's exactly. Yeah, that sort of thing. 3s are usually called the achiever. And they are they're inward and outward focused, but they seem to be very outward focused. They are very driven. They're the people who don't mind being asked to stay late at work. They can very easily become workaholics, but it's also not just, it's not like it's just a corporate type of person. I know that I definitely have people who maybe are stay-at-home parent or just doing something totally different that don't really care about the rat race, They're like, how could I be a 3? Like, I don't care about that kind of thing. Well, it's achieving in whatever sphere is important for you, right? So maybe it's achieving in your home or maybe it's achieving in your art. It can show up in a lot of ways. But they're very image conscious. They're very aware of how people perceive them.
Too aware.
Yeah. But they often have trouble actually telling what their own feelings are. So it's like they can see everybody else's. They're pretty attuned with other people's feelings, but they're not always great at telling what's actually going on inside them. The 4.
Tell us about yourself.
I will. This is always it's always the hardest, right?
Right. Well,
maybe not for you as a 7.
No, it isn't. Touche.
Yeah. So, individualist, romantic. 4s tend to be kind of sensitive, moody, artistic. I don't know. I guess refined it feels weird calling myself refined, but like,
you're like the bohemians of the world.
We're a bit temperamental, kind of in a similar way with 1s, like, and they share a line on the Enneagram. We both want things right, but I think for a different reason. Like I once had a conversation, with some friends about, I was picking a new color for my door. And it was really stressing me out. And I was going through all these different shades of blue. And
4 problems.
I know. And it was literally like about how I would be perceived by the world and like which one. So my friend who's a 1 was like, I don't know, like that seems like what I would do. And I was like, yeah, but
for different reasons.
Why would you be going through it? And she's like, oh, right. It was to find the right color for me.
Right.
Right. So 4s are very focused inwardly. They're pretty self-referential. And when healthy, they can be great at like showing other perspectives that other types maybe just don't even see. But they can also be really moody and withdrawn and difficult.
Yep.
So says my husband.
I will concur as the mom of 1 who works with lots of them. Yes.
Yes. Yeah. So then the 5 is often called the investigator. They're very cerebral, or they usually are very cerebral. They're often pretty intense, but in their head, so maybe you won't see that intensity in the outside world as much. They love to do think mental maps. Like if you think Sherlock with his mind castle that he goes to, that's kind of a 5. They often feel like they need to keep their energy because they don't have as much energy maybe as other types. And so they end up hoarding their time and energy, and that can show up in different ways, but they're really, they're really important in the way that they can just think things through. And if you want to like learn something about some particular topic, like go to your 5 friends.
Oh,
They
yeah.
probably already know it.
All the way back to like the Gutenberg press.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. Exactly. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. They're the ones that'll go in and like learn all of the things about this one topic that they're interested in. So the 6s, often called the Loyalists, the 6s are really concerned about being committed to something. They're really focused on community and how they can support that. They can often be really funny and engaging and charming.
they're hilarious.
Yeah. Yeah. But then there's also this flip side where they're also like really responsible, and they can be very like really distrusting of other people and institutions especially. And so their main thing, I think, is that, they can't, not that they can't start, but that they have trouble trusting themselves, right? So they are looking everywhere else for that. And I think that's what a lot of that community building piece comes from. They're looking around to everybody else and want to make sure that everybody else is.
They're also some of the most anxious people.
Yes.
They can either be phobic or counterphobic. But when they're at their best, I mean, they're like Ellen DeGeneres. She's a 6.
Yes.
They're just, or Princess Diana, also a 6. They just want us all to get along. And when it's not working, that's when they get hella anxious.
Yes. Well, and I think the anxious piece is really important because fear is often what is
their deadly sin. Yeah.
Used. Yeah. For 6s, but anxiety is really more accurate, I think, or maybe not accurate, but I think that resonates with people more.
It's a more modern way of explaining it.
So
moving from fear to faith, or in this case, from anxiety to self-trust, I think is the way that I explained it in sessions. Yeah. Really important for 6.
Yeah. Okay. 7. Are you ready to hear about it?
I'm ready. Tell me about me, girl.
So you're awesome and fabulous.
Yeah. True.
That's all true, though.
Yeah, that's true.
So 7s, often called the Enthusiast, they're the friends that you want to just go out in the town with or go on vacation with. Yeah, like I have a sister who's a 7, and she is always doing the next big adventure. Always. She's always going, which exhausts me, but it's
fair.
So they're very busy. They're very fun-loving. Their thing is, part of that is driven out of a need or a desire to not be trapped in their own pain.
Yeah.
And so sevens want to just go to the next thing, the next fun thing, so they don't have to stop and sit in that because they are afraid that they're going to be trapped there.
True.
So that can lead them to be kind of like scattered and distractible sometimes if they are kind of just running from the next thing to the next thing to the next thing. But in health, man, 7s are so important for us. We need them. My husband, I said he was a 6 earlier, but he has a really strong 7 wing, and that brings so much levity and just really, really good stuff to our family.
Levity to the brevity, I like to say. Yes.
It's important. 8s are often called the challenger. They're very assertive. With some of these types, I think people can hide, but like 8s, you pretty much know that they're an 8.
You can't hide an 8.
So they're it's kind of your like stereotypical male, or what they're supposed to be, quote unquote.
In Western society. Yep.
Yeah. So 8s are very kind of domineering, in your face. They like to argue just to argue. They actually feel connected when you argue with them. And this is, I think, where it can be so helpful to know these things about someone you're in a relationship with, because for another number, arguing can be really
scary.
Difficult and scary. Yeah. And for an 8, they feel really connected. And so just knowing that, and knowing like, okay, if I'm in a relationship with an 8 and they're arguing with me, it doesn't necessarily mean that they hate me. It actually probably means that they like me, and this feels like a safe place.
But it's their way of loving you, just like the ones want to reform you. The 8, right. For the 8, I often say like to my couples who one of them's an 8, like for them, intensity equals intimacy. Whereas for the rest of us, it's like, fuck, you're running my soul through a cheese grater. Why are we doing this? Yes.
Yeah. So when they're healthy though, oh man, they are like they're like giant teddy bears underneath that like prickly exterior.
Tender warrior.
Yes. Yeah. And they are so, warrior is a really good term for it, because they are just so out for the vulnerable. Basically.
Yeah, the underdog. Mother Teresa was an 8, they say.
Yeah, I love that. And then last, the 9s are often called peacemakers. 9s are just super easygoing. They're kind of go with the flow. Like they're the people who, if you ask them where they want to go to dinner, and they say, I don't care, whatever. They
mean
most of the time really mean it. Once in a while, they will have an opinion, but often they really just don't. And they're very caring. They're very receptive to people. They can be really funny. And then of course in unhealth that can lead them to kind of be just often couch potatoes, that sort of thing. Just like numbing out is a 9's favorite thing to do when they're not in a good space.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, their psychological defense mechanism, that's the other fascinating piece about this, is as a therapist, each of the 9 types are prone to different quote unquote disorders. I hate that word because we're all on a spectrum anyway. And the deadly sin for the 9 being the sloth, the deadly sin, just like that's your Achilles heel. 9s, I have seen in my clinic be particularly prone to schizoid disorder, which they just get lost in their heads. They just, the fantasy up in my head is so much better than what's going on out here.
Yeah.
So let's just, stay up in there. And my sister's a 9 and she's a social worker. So she's a very self-actualized 9, but she'll joke with me that, she'll think about saying something to me or anyone else on the planet. And then she'll instantly think, oh, but then they're going to want to say this. And then I'll have to respond. And by the time she says it, she's like, never mind. And but meanwhile, I'm just driving and she stayed silent this whole time because it's just, it feels like a lot of work.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think that's a really good point because the sloth piece can feel, it can trip people up because they can think, well, I don't just lay around the house all the time. Like, even though sometimes like the sloth piece doesn't necessarily mean like you're actually not moving.
No.
It means that you avoid doing the work. And sometimes it's the emotional work.
Most times, because that takes a lot of energy, if we're honest.
It does.
Even as a therapist, I know that I can only see so many clients per day, even as a 7, because even with all this boundless energy, because that's emotional processing's a lot. It's a workout.
Yeah.
So I get it. So you're a 4, husband's a 6. Any idea what your 3 kiddos are so far?
So I have inklings. Yeah. I mean, I really do try not to type them because there's, I always tell people they're not cooked yet.
Right. That's true.
But, I see a lot of the 4-ness in my daughter.
Mm-hmm.
And I see, with the boys, I'm still trying to figure it out. The youngest one, I could see a lot. I could see some 7, 8 energy for sure. Mm-hmm. And the middle guy he's interesting. I don't know yet. But it may be in the like 5, 6 area. I could see that easily. But I don't know. He's super interesting. And I don't have him figured out. He's one of those kids where you get a little nugget every now and then. You're like, oh, there it is.
It's funny because I love, and I'm big on this too, like even if you're married to someone, it's important not to try and type them, just like a therapist should not diagnose their own partner. We let people wake up to their stuff for themselves.
Yes. Yeah.
And I think around puberty is where things really start to kind of take an interesting cementing, if you will, of that primary lens. Because before then, I think kiddos are kind of reflecting back their parents here or there. And so I remember my kids actually wanted to take an assessment, and assessments are just conversational starters. They're not the be all end all. But at first, when she was 10, my type 4 came out as like a perfect 4-way tie of her 4 primary caregivers. And I totally had her pegged for an 8 with the 7 wing because she's so stubborn, like 4s can be. And it wasn't until puberty hit that all of a sudden I was like, oh, okay. I could totally see that. She's a 4 with a 5 wing. So she's got that very introspective, go to her cave, but so damn stubborn you 4s can be. And I just didn't.
Just a little bit. That's interesting though, because I totally see 4s can kind of show up as 8-ish sometimes. I see that in myself in certain situations. I think it relates to some of the triads that we probably don't have time to get into, but there's that reactive stance for 4s that was really interesting to find that in myself, because I knew that was there, but then to see like, oh, that's why I'm reacting so strongly. And I can I can go head to head with an 8. As long as I'm not feeling emotionally vulnerable, I can go head to head with an 8.
That's an
All
important
day.
piece, that
Yeah.
vulnerability. And
Yes.
Lord knows that they can't handle feeling vulnerable. So there it is. And if you're willing, I would love to have you back on to talk about spin-off topics.
Yeah.
I do think tritypes and instinctual variants and all that stuff is really helpful, both clinically and personally. So just briefly though, the Enneagram, has 3 triads. It's, 3 and 3.
Yes.
So we got the head, heart, and gut, or intellectual, emotional, and instinctual.
Yep.
And the tritype says, okay, well, while we all have our primary lens, we're still taking in information through the other 2 centers. And so when someone is taking in information from their gut, even if they're naturally a head person, how do they do that? And so you remember from all 3 types. And that does provide a lot of it for you phobic types who don't want to be typed, categorized. The triads can be a great space to have
they're
so much more nuance.
Yeah, there's so much play in it. And I think I think part of what's tricky for people who are resistant is that it is such a big system and it is so complex that there's so much to learn before you get to the point where you can see, how expansive it is, right? And so, because you have to start somewhere. So it's usually like, well, these are the 9 types. And this is the 1-sentence introduction to those 9 types. And it can feel a little like, well, this is like everything else I've ever heard. But when you really get into it, it is so nuanced and so just such a great way to lead you forward in your life rather than keep you where you are.
Yeah. So Havilah, would you agree though that people tend to really find themselves, especially if they're torn, not so much in where their strengths lie, but in why they're running away from a particular thing?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Absolutely.
Okay. So it isn't just me.
I know. I always tell people, I say like, whenever I'm teaching about it, we start off with like, this is vulnerable work. This is really tricky and vulnerable work. And may not feel great at the beginning, but what you probably should do is look to the negative aspects, look to the unhealthy aspects, look at where you go in stress, and that's where it's going to show up for you. That's almost 100% of the time, that is where people find themselves. And not because the Enneagram tells you how bad you are, right? No. But because there's something about it that's just easier to identify yourself in that space. But then I think it also gives you that freedom to say, I'm acting in this unhelpful way, but this is the motivation beneath it. And this is why I'm moving in this way. And if I can start to move out of that motivation, right? Like as a 4, if I can start to move out of that belief, not move as in like, may have my actions come out of it, but move away from that belief to a more centered belief, that away from thinking that, I'm not part of the body of humans at large. Like there's something wrong with me. If I can start to see myself as others see me, that can be so helpful in then moving into a more integrated space.
And so healing. I mean, yes. I don't know if it was just me, but realizing that, hey girl, the reason that you always try to be so damn independent is because you're afraid of relying on other people.
Yeah.
You'd rather just reach for a sleeve of Oreos, since our deadly sin is gluttony. And it's not just food. Usually for me, it's about adventures. On to the next thing. Is because we're afraid of being vulnerable, because when we were vulnerable in childhood, we were let down over and over and we lost people. And I am the stereotypical 7. Yeah. So I lost a brother to cancer. He was 9 years younger than me. So for all of my formative years, my parents were busy trying to save their child, which I get. Yeah. And I actually got it then.
Yeah, of
but
course.
That also meant they weren't available as much as my childlike adolescent brain wanted.
Yeah.
And so we had to take care of ourselves. So it just cemented that. So to actually see that it wasn't just me, that there's thousands of other type 7s that somehow internalize this message, because whether it was true or not is not the point, because the brain perception's reality.
Right. Yeah.
Girl, I cried. I was like, there it is. And that's why I do this thing. And okay. And it gives you a unique prescription of how to work out of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
What a gift, I think.
So powerful. Yeah.
So, tell me, What has been your biggest aha moment in realizing that you are the individualist or the romantic?
At the beginning, I shared that moment when I was first introduced to it. And I think that really was like, and it's interesting because even as cemented as what that felt for me, and when I heard some of those things and heard things like how I, not being connected to other people, being like feeling lonely in a crowd. And when I heard those things like that felt so deeply true. But even so, and I know a lot of people struggle with like, what type am I actually? Like I go back and forth every couple of years, like, oh, maybe I'm actually a 1, because guess what? I'm a firstborn girl of four kids, and I've got a lot of 1 in me. Like, and I go to 1, right?
You do.
And I have a strong 3-wing too. And so, so it's just interesting that even though, and I always come back to 4, every time I look, again, the unhealthy, every time I look at the unhealthy behavior, I'm like, oh,
it's
no.
always that thing.
I am not the one cleaning my bathroom when I feel bad.
No, 4s do not do that. Should see my 4's room.
Right? I know. My sister-in-law, who is a 1, does that. Like
angry cleans. Anxious
but
cleans.
like when I'm in that space, I am a puddle on the floor. Like I think that's the thing that keeps coming back to me as a 4. Like I am almost incapable of doing what needs to be done, just the practical stuff in my life, if I am emotionally overwhelmed.
I laugh because it's so damn true.
And I found, our family went through some really difficult stuff in this last year, and I can, but it is so
hard.
It requires so much of me to be able to be like pretty present with my emotions that are crazy at the moment, and also like doing the things that need to be done in the world. So I think that is the piece I keep coming back to. Like, yeah.
Which is huge, because I tell people this is kind of like a shortcut to personal development. It almost feels like I'm cheating sometimes. So if I'm getting overwhelmed or I'm acting out in a way that is not typical with what people would assume, like cheerleaders don't get sad. If I'm acting like that sad cheerleader in the corner, there's something off. All I have to do is do a quick scan usually. And it's a great starting point to go, hey, Tams, is there anywhere in life right now that we don't feel like we can rely on someone, that someone let us down?
Yeah.
And 90% of the time, I swear it is related to that. Even if it's something as stupid as somebody wasn't home for dinner when I expected them to be.
Yeah.
The brain's not always rational, right? 4s, there's nothing wrong, but you still want to be like sitting there listening to Adele crying into a cupcake.
I know.
Reading like Thomas Merton or something. I walk by, I'm like, what?
Who doesn't want to read Thomas Merton?
I mean, I do, but for a totally different reason than you would, right? It's the reasoning behind it. And I'm sorry, I never have time for Adele. I'm like, your voice is beautiful. God, it's so sad. Why do we stay there? 2 seconds later, I'm like, yep, I set fire to the rain. Moving on with the fire piece, not the rain piece, right? Such a 7 thing to say.
Yeah.
But I love that shortcut of that is how you will know. So I like the assessment as a place to start. I know a lot of Enneagram teachers don't, but I think sometimes people get so overwhelmed.
Yes. Yeah.
Like it's a conversation opener. And so if you've got like 2 or 3, you've at least narrowed it down from 9 to 3.
Yes. Yep. Exactly.
And then I recommend that they take a look at like, where did you get the gut clench? Don't just look at the strengths, because we all got those strengths. But like you said, where do you go in stress? And that for me has never changed.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just doesn't.
Yeah. And I agree. I like the assessments. I think that they can be helpful if they're helpful.
Right.
If. I always liken it to a springboard. Like if it works for you, then it gets you a lot farther. If you got off balance, then you're just gonna have to get up and, try a different way, basically, because it can be so helpful. Like I said, for me, like that's it I knew very, very quickly, but
I did too, but for people who haven't attended like the workshop or who aren't willing to read a book on it, because it really does take that in-depth look. And so the assessment that I recommend is through the Enneagram Institute. It's Riso and Hudson.
Me too.
Because you're going to get a good 40-page PDF. end that breakdown. Don't take the free one. I mean, it's $12. I like literally beg my clients. I'm like, if I have to pay for you to take it, I will, because the other ones that they send me, I'm like, and now do you know? They're like, no, I have no idea, because it doesn't provide any information.
Yeah.
$12, the best $12 you'll spend on personal development. It's like 2 drinks at Starbucks, girl.
Right. It's true. It's true.
And then you'll have this wonderful, personal development tool in your pocket.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then we go from there. So
yeah.
I could talk to you for days.
Yeah. Yay.
Definitely going to have to do this again.
Yes.
But
it's super fun.
tell people, this is such a backwards interview, because normally I start off like, tell me about yourself. We didn't do that. So tell my listeners a little bit about who Havilah is and what she's up to.
Yeah. Well, currently I am producing a podcast called Little Faith, podcast for parents who doubt. And it's a podcast where it's directed for parents, but it's really just about being human. Like that's really what it boils down to. So we have conversations around a lot of different issues, kind of through the lens of like, how do you parent well and how are you a good human well when the map that you maybe were given as a kid that was very black and white, like it has all gone away and you don't have those parameters anymore, whether it was like a faith shift or something. And for most of my listeners, it has been some sort of deconstruction or faith shift. And okay, so now how do I parent my kids? Because I knew the right thing to tell them when trauma happened before, but like now, what do I tell them? Or how to, like right now we're doing a series on our bodies. So we're talking about sex and relationships with our bodies.
Yeah, I love that topic.
Yeah. So it's been really fun. It's really great. I've got 3 kids. My husband and I live in the Grand Rapids, Michigan area. So we get to go to the beach a lot because we're super close to Lake Michigan.
I grew up in Great Lakes before we went to Japan. Good
yeah. It's a beautiful area. And so, yeah, I've done a whole bunch of things in my life. But I really, really love leading groups through these sorts of self-development tools. So you can find me several places, but you can find me on Instagram at Transformation Collaborative. It's transformation_collaborative, and at Little Faith Podcast.
Great.
And both of those are great places to just connect with me and see the work that I'm doing.
And I just got to add that while we were talking before the show, your name is such a type 4 name.
I wonder about that sometimes. Like, and also, like, there are so many things about my family life growing up that were so just weird. I mean, we were just, and so I always wonder, like, am I this way because I'm this way, or am I this way partly because of all of the other things?
Such a 4 question.
I always go with both.
I think it is both. I think that I always would have been a 7, but I think those experiences like cemented it in, I think the personality becomes more rigid from a psychospiritual lens, but that's our work, to become less rigid and to be able to reflect more of the divine and not just this one thing.
Yes, absolutely.
You are such a joy. Thank you so much, girl.
Thank you. This was super, super fun.
Oh,
coming from a 4.
My 7-ness loves that.
Thanks for listening to the Sacred Psychology Podcast. I pray you found some inspiration and empowerment to go out and make this life the most fulfilling possible. You can follow Sacred Psychology on Facebook and YouTube. If you haven't yet, please go to Apple Podcasts and subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. Tag us on social media and let us know what you think as well. Please note that the information provided is not meant to convey professional, psychological, or medical advice. If you could use such services, I highly recommend seeking them out from someone you trust. To get in touch with me personally or to see how we might work together, please check out ariatherapy.com or talesfromatrapezoid.com. Until next time, everyone.